Rain hammered the alley as if it were trying to erase something, and Matthew froze mid-step when he recognized the shape of the woman huddled against the brick wall. The flickering streetlight caught her face for just a second, long enough to tighten his chest and steal his breath. It was Rachel, his ex-wife, thinner than memory allowed. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and her hands wrapped around a paper cup like it was the last warm thing left in the world. He had been walking home from a late shift, boots soaked, mind numb from another day of fixing other people's problems, while barely holding his own life together. Cleveland nights had a way of feeling endless, especially when you were a single dad with a growing boy waiting at home and a past you tried not to touch. Seeing her there felt like the city had reached into his ribs and twisted hard. What if this were you? He wondered. The person who once promised forever, now reduced to asking strangers for spare change. If you stood there soaked and stunned, would you turn away to protect yourself, or step closer and risk breaking all over again? Rachel looked up as if she sensed him, her eyes wide with something between shame and relief. Matthew remembered those eyes from hospital rooms and cramped apartments, from nights when love felt like a shared battle against the world. He also remembered how addiction crept in quietly, turning promises into excuses, and finally tearing their family apart. He had walked away not because he stopped loving her, but because Noah was only 4 and needed at least one parent who could stay standing. The court papers, the quiet apartment afterward, the silence where laughter used to live, all of it rushed back in a single breath. Matthew stood there longer than made sense, rain soaking his jacket, heart pounding with questions that had no easy answers. Rachel's clothes hung loose, a red cardigan threadbare at the elbows. Her shoulders shook from cold, fear, or both. The cup held a few coins that clinked softly whenever her hands trembled. Something cracked inside him, a soundless break that hurt more than the loudest fights they had ever had. This was not how any story was supposed to end. Life after the divorce had been survival, nothing poetic about it. Matthew worked multiple jobs at different times, learned to braid Noah's hair for school plays, learned to cook meals that came from boxes but still tasted like care. Some nights, after Noah fell asleep, he collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling, wondering if he had done the right thing. He prayed quietly, not for miracles, but for strength to keep choosing the harder path. Seeing Rachel now made all those choices feel fragile, like they could dissolve in the rain. He moved closer without quite deciding to, guided by something older than logic. Rachel tried to straighten herself, pride flickering weakly, but exhaustion won. Matthew noticed the bruises on her arms, the hollowed cheeks, the way she avoided his eyes. He thought about Noah at home, probably finishing homework at the kitchen table, trusting his father to return the same man he had left an hour earlier. The weight of responsibility pressed down hard, yet walking away felt like leaving part of himself to drown. Matthew removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders, his hands shaking as much as hers. The simple act felt enormous, like crossing a line he had drawn years ago just to survive. Rachel clutched the fabric, her eyes filling. And for a moment he saw the woman he once loved, the one who sang hymns off-key on Sunday mornings and believed grace was real even when life proved otherwise. His heart didn't break in one clean split, but in 1,000 small fractures. He helped her to her feet and guided her toward the street, ignoring the curious glances of passing cars. Every step felt heavy with memory and fear. He thought about the shelter where he sometimes volunteered with Noah during the holidays, the sermons about loving without conditions, the warnings about setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. What if bringing her back into his life cost him everything he had rebuilt? What if refusing meant condemning her to disappear completely? At home, the lights were on, warm and steady, a small island of safety against the storm. Noah's laughter drifted faintly from his room, and Matthew paused at the door, the sound slicing straight through him. He prayed again, this time desperately, asking for wisdom he didn't feel worthy of. He knew this night would change something forever, no matter what he chose. Rachel sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, steam rising from a mug Matthew placed in front of her. She looked around the apartment with a mix of wonder and regret, taking in the drawings on the fridge, the neatly stacked schoolbooks, the life that had continued without her. Matthew watched quietly, noticing how small she seemed, how much the years had taken. He didn't ask questions, yet some answers were too fragile to touch. Over the following weeks, change came slowly and unevenly. Rachel entered a recovery program with Matthew's cautious support. She slept on the couch, attended meetings, and fought demons that did not surrender easily. There were setbacks, nights when Matthew lay awake listening for signs of trouble, mornings when fear sat heavy in his chest. Noah learned the truth gently, with age-appropriate honesty, and surprised Matthew with a compassion that made his eyes burn. Children, he realized, often understood grace better than adults. Matthew struggled too. Old wounds reopened, trust fought to regrow, and resentment surfaced when exhaustion hit. Yet there were quiet moments that stitched something new together. Rachel cooking dinner with shaky confidence, Noah showing her a school project, Matthew catching himself smiling at a sound he thought he would never hear again. The family was not healed, but it was trying. Months later, Matthew stood alone on the balcony, city lights blinking below, thinking about how close he came to walking past that alley. He imagined an alternate life where he chose safety over mercy, and the thought hollowed him out. He knew the road ahead was uncertain, that forgiveness did not erase consequences, that love required boundaries as much as hope. Still, something steady lived in his chest, now a belief that broken things were not always beyond repair. If you were in his place, standing in the rain with your past begging at your feet, what would you do? Protect the life you rebuilt, or risk it for the chance to redeem something lost? Matthew understood now that sometimes the bravest thing isn't walking away, but turning back with open eyes and a heart guarded by faith. And even in the coldest rain, second chances can still begin.